Hello Sudoku friends, welcome to an evil level puzzle, this time from Sudoku.com. I transferred the grid over to SudokuExchange.com's user interface, which I find somewhat better. Let's see what this puzzle has in store for us. Here's a 5 blocking down and a 5 blocking over, so here's an easy 5. A couple of 4s are blocking these squares here, and these two 4s block these squares. So a 4 must go here. There's a 6 blocking across and there's a 6 blocking down, so here's a 6. The 4 blocks over here and the 4 blocks down, so we need to find a 4 for one of these two squares and therefore for one of these two squares in row 8. This 6 blocks these two squares, so it's quite obvious that one of these two squares must be a 6, and they will block these squares. This 6 will block these squares, and this 6 blocks these squares, so a 6 must go here. The 9 blocks over and the 9 blocks down, so one of these two squares will be a 9. Here is a little pattern that I think many people have baptized the New York Times pattern because it often appears in the New York Times hard Sudoku puzzles. Look at the 2, 4, and the 6 here. They clearly can't go here. So 2, 4, and a 6 must go in these 3 squares. That doesn't always mean that we can immediately place one of these digits in these squares, but it shows us that these two squares must be the difference between what's already available in the row and the 2, 4, and a 6. In this case, it's a 1 and a 3. So if these are a 1 and a 3, we need to figure out what these 3 squares can be, and they must be a 7, 8, and a 9. We cannot solve any of those immediately, but at least we now have a very good idea about what will eventually have to go where. So this pattern here is very important.
It's really important.
We call it the New York Times pattern, as I said. Here's another example of how to use this pattern. Let's examine the 1, 6, 8, and a 9 here and see how they can be applied to this row here. First of all, we can discard the 6 because we already have a 6 in the row. But let's look at the 1, 8, and a 9. They need to go in 3 of these 5 squares, and we can figure out which 3 they are going to be. Because we have a 1, 8 here and we have a 1, 8 here. So a 1 and an 8 will have to go in 2 of these 3 squares. And from early analysis, we know that the 9 blocks down and this 9 blocks over. So the third digit that needs to go here is a 9. So a 1, 8, and a 9 must go in these squares. And while we can't place the 1, 8, and a 9 yet, we now can see that these two 5s block down. And this is blocked by a 1, 8, or a 9. So a 5 must go in this square. And that should give us a 3. Because these are still a 1, 8, and a 9. The 3 blocks down here, that means that one of these squares must be a 3. So this 3 blocks down, a 3 here or here blocks up, and therefore this must be a 3. We can continue to use the ghost 1, 8, and a 9 here and say, okay, so what about a 2? A 2 must go in one of these 3 squares, and a 2 also blocks this square. This 2 blocks across here, so a 2 goes here. We could have found that out more easily by just looking at the 2 here and the 2 here, but I often like to use this New York Times trick.
It's not a trick, man.
Because it solves a lot of puzzles, I can tell you. Now these 2 must be a 6 and a 1. The 6 blocks across here, so this is a 1 and this is a 6. So back to the 8, 9, and a 1 here. We got an 8 and a 1 in this column now, so the 9 must go here. And this is now an 8 and a 1. 4, 6, and 7 for these squares here now, and those we can't solve yet. Row 2 seems very difficult because we only have 3 givens. But have a look at the 6s. This 6 blocks here, this 6 blocks here, this 6 blocks here, and we got a 6 and a 6 blocking these squares. So a 6 has got to go here. These two squares must be a 4 and a 7. Here's another nice piece of information. Look at these two squares and try to figure out what they can be.
No, we can figure it out.
Because we already have a lot of givens intersecting and observing these two squares here. So these two squares cannot be a 1, but they can be a 2. They cannot be a 3 or a 4 or a 5 or a 6 or a 9. And a 7 we know must go here or here. So the only two digits that can go here have to be a 2 and an 8. And given that information, we know that these must be a 1, 6, and a 7. And actually, this must be a 1 or a 6 because a 7 is forced into one of these two squares. So a 2 and an 8 here. And that means that given the 2's blocking across here and a 2 blocking down here, this must be a 2. This 2 blocks down, this blocks over, this therefore is a 2, making this square also a 2. Now we are looking at a missing 7 and an 8 in these squares here. One of these must be an 8, therefore the 7 goes to this square and the 8 must go here. This is still a 1 and a 3, therefore these must be a 7 and a 9. And the 9 we still can't do much about because these two must be 9s and so must these two here. But having 8s blocking down here and 8s across and an 8 up gives us an 8 for this square here. And now I think this must be a 6 because these two squares are blocked by this 6 and this 6 is blocking this square. So yes, a 6 must go here. And that gives us a 6 for the top row in block 3, like so. And I think we need one more 6. Yes, a 6 blocks up, 1 blocks down, 1 blocks across. Therefore, this is the last 6 of this grid. These squares now must be a 1. And the 1 is blocking here and here, right? So a 1 goes here, and therefore this is a 1 and this is a 3. And that makes this a 3 as well. These two must be a 9 and a 5. We got a 5 blocking down, so the 9 goes here and the 5 here, and that also takes care of the 9 we do remember that we needed for the bottom row. These two must be a 7 and a 5. We got a 5 blocking over, so this is a 7, this is a 5. 7 blocks across, 7 blocks down. One of these is a 7 blocking up. This 7 blocks up, this 7 blocks across, this therefore must be a 7. And the 4 must go here. The last square here is a 3. We know that these are 1 and 8, therefore this must be a 7. The last digit here now seems to be, yes, a 3, making this one here a 5. 5 blocks up, 5 blocks up, 5 blocks over, and 5 blocks over. So 5 goes in this square here. Let's see, these two squares must be a 7, which of course can't go here, but must go here, and a 1. Still a 2, 8 here, untouchable for the time being. Still a 1, 8 here, and that makes these a 3, 4, and a 7. There's a 3 and a 7 here blocking, so the 4 must go here, and this is now a 3, 7. This square has got to be a 2, and these 3 squares now must be a 1, 8, and a 9. Let's see, 1 and 8 blocking up, 9 goes here, and 9 blocking over, 9 blocking over, 9 blocking up. Therefore, this must also be a 9. 3, 4, 7 here. Let's see, there's a 4 blocking here, a 4 blocking here, so 4 is bound for this square and therefore for this square as well. These two must be a 2, 8 and a 2, 8, but we do have a 2 blocking this square, so it must be an 8 and this must be a 2 and this therefore must be an 8. And that gives us an 8 for this square and for this, and we know that this therefore must be a 1, as must this square here. That gives us a 2 here. These two must be a 1 and a 3. 3 blocks over, so the 1 goes here and the 3 here. And that gives us a 3 for this square and a 7 for this and for this. And this last square must be a 9. I hope that you have got a clear understanding of how the New York Times pattern works. It is extremely useful in all kinds of Sudokus, and I use it for virtually every single Sudoku grid that I solve. I hope you enjoyed it and that you will come back for more soon.